Welcome to the Springs in the Desert podcast. We're those friends that you can take with you wherever you are on the path of infertility. Hey there, Springs in the Desert. I am Jillian, your podcast host, and I am back with one of our very favorite guests, Edward. How are you today, Edward?
I'm doing really well, Jillian. How about yourself?
I'm good. I'm always excited to talk with you. So many of our guests have specific insight and wisdom into certain topics in the realm of infertility. And you are just always so, I think, practical, but just so thoughtful about how you present to our community. And we appreciate everything you're doing on the blog and here on the podcast and whenever you show up in all of the other ways in the community. And so I always look forward to chatting with you. And I think that this episode is actually going to be timed really well. We just came off of the holidays. And as we all know, holidays can be really difficult for those in a season of infertility. We're seeing family members or having conversations that maybe are difficult that we weren't maybe prepared for, or we're having bigger things that might be challenging. But in the new year, we're talking about planning goals in the church, not quite yet, but we're preparing to go back into ordinary time for a bit before we enter the Lent season. And so we're trying to just get a good routine. And I thought it would be good to talk about daily life in a season of infertility. And I think there are so many ways that infertility can affect our daily lives, but that sometimes it might be difficult to be attuned to that, or we might think it's something else. And I thought it would be good to have a conversation with you. So I thought let's maybe open it up, Edward. What, in your experience, what might be some of the more like cyclical, everyday difficulties or disappointments or challenges that couples might face in a season of infertility?
Absolutely. And I'm going to be speaking both professionally as a counselor as well as personally with my own walk with infertility as well. So,
excellent.
Whole point to start with, Jillian, and I love how you said that we're heading into this slow time after the holidays where we're thinking a lot more about our infertility. Maybe the emotions are coming up more. So I think this is well timed. But yes, I think in the daily routines of everything, those emotions do start popping up. The reminders of our infertility start popping up. Oftentimes my clients will talk about how like when they're busy, it's easy to stay distracted. You're not really thinking as much about it, but
right.
Holiday rush now, if you're left alone with your thoughts, we're probably going to have some more of these daily reminders. So I think of things such as, well, one, maybe this like emptiness or this quiet that you sometimes experience. Maybe perhaps you expected that you would have children or more children in the home. You expected to have your hands full and things would be busy and hectic. Yet when you live your daily life and look around your home and just experience it, it feels empty. It feels quiet. And I think about how sometimes you have that room set aside where you're like, that was going to be our nursery. And
yeah.
And so now what do we do with that kind of room for example? So I think about that. I think about how we can go to Mass and how we are reminded that, oh, like, where do we fit? Like, we're this couple, we've been married for a while, we don't fit into the families category, we don't have those little ones that we're trying to wrangle in. And so there's those reminders. There's I was hoping to share these experiences with children. Maybe we have family traditions around the year or just family time. And we thought that, hey, we were going to be making rituals and making memories with that, and yet we're not. So I don't know. There's so many different reminders, the cyclical nature of it's another month, another cycle. My period just hit again. Reminded of that and the roller coaster that comes with hope and then the discouragement, despair as well. So I don't know. It's just this prolonged thing, which is both a cycle, it just keeps repeating, as well as it's just like this prolonged thing that just doesn't end. Like you're almost like frozen in time too. So I don't know. I have so many things about that.
Yeah, I appreciate that both and view, because I think we can all relate to that. Your cycle begins again and it's frustrating that day or for the duration of your period, and you and your spouse are trying to work through that. But then there's, like you said, there's these kind of like outside of the home or even like within your home, these areas or you're going to Mass and it's this prolonged, like, where do I fit in? I can't really find, thankfully, right? Women's bodies have within the cycle, there's different seasons within that cycle. And so you're not reminded of that every single day, But every time you go to mass or every time you pass that special room that you were saving, or I know when we first got married, I was maybe even still in college and I was just dating my husband. I had started saving these ideas of things I wanted to do with our family and with kids and these fun activities. And I had them in this box. And so I just shoved that box in a corner because I didn't want to open it, but I knew it was there. And so I appreciate all of those examples because I think we can relate to all of those, that there's things that happen maybe weekly, like going to mass or even the workplace. I think we hear from the community when you're going to work or if you're in meetings or you're meeting new people and networking, often the first few questions, are you married? Do you have children? And it's hard to escape that constant reminder that I have to answer that question. But I think it's good though, Edward, that you gave those examples because they are difficulties in a season of infertility. It's okay that those things are challenging because we have hopes and desires and dreams, and those are good to have. And I'm wondering, I think when I was passing that box in the closet or when I'm at mass and I'm like, gosh, I don't really know. We don't really fit in with the young adults really anymore, but we don't really fit in with the families with children. And so where does our family fit? How would you encourage a couple to begin talking about that and to recognize maybe some of the things that we're believing about ourselves that aren't true? How could we change that conversation?
Well, I think first starting out, just trying to foster an environment of openness and sharing, right? Checking in with each other, prompting questions of each other, and really having an opportunity to share our perceptions, our thoughts, our feelings, and start to express that. Maybe in your example that I'm starting to feel disconnected, I'm feeling isolated, lonely. It's so powerful when you're able to put that into words and use those feeling words and be able to express that and to feel seen and understood, particularly by your spouse, right? So you have this kind of built-in community, if you will, within your marriage. And so that's a great place to start with trying to build yourself up with community when you're experiencing disconnect. Obviously, there's a lot of relationships where we can try to do that and try to do the best we can in the parish. It's okay, try to make some friends and try to make connections, but there is going to be still that kind of weird dynamic of maybe the parish's ministries are geared towards, here's the youth group, here's the family ministry kind of thing. But I love that with your marriage, just opening it up and try to check in with each other.
And I think that it's okay to sometimes, and maybe there's a few things going on with what I am thinking about, that maybe I'm trying to shove my feelings aside. I just don't want to deal with them. I'm putting them aside. And so I'm not talking about it. And I think if I don't recognize or if I don't talk about it, it won't feel as real or it won't be as hard to work through. But I could see it really simply. You and your spouse, maybe you pick a time, maybe you do something special. You go out for coffee or ice cream or something that you love to do. Maybe you go for a walk or whatever it is. Maybe you have some favorite comfy chairs and you're just sitting together and just saying how are you doing this week? I know this was hard. And just being there together in it, I think could bring so much fruit just from those conversations. And then saying, I noticed this couple at Mass and trying to start, I like that fostering an openness that might look a little different for every couple, but to be able to say, yeah, I was struggling this week, or I had this idea this week. What do you think about that? How could we work towards that goal? Or how could we reach out to someone? Or I had this idea about having people over. Who could we invite? And I like just being in it together because it's easy to not do that, I think. And so, yeah, I think that's really great. And Edward, maybe for those who have started that, they are having conversations, but they're feeling still a little bit I'm not quite sure how to navigate. We have this idea and then we get to Mass and it's really hard. And I don't actually make the invitation, or we started talking through things, but I could use a little extra support. What other maybe tools or resources or ideas for couples would you have for them to just affirm, right, the goodness of their marriage and that there's so many ways that God is calling them to nurture their marriage and the community around them? And what might you suggest to them?
Right. So I think on two layers, there might be a sense that I'm not good enough or something's wrong with me. I'm broken, especially if you're the spouse that is has some of the infertility factors at play. Or in terms of your marriage too, maybe you're feeling like our marriage isn't as life-giving, or perhaps we're not as holy because we're not conceiving or we're not conceiving again. So I think on a couple different layers, it's really important. There's opportunities for you to try to foster healthier affirmations about yourself, about your spouse, and about your marriage. So you can do that for yourself first and foremost, right? It's really important to recognize, when am I getting stuck in some of those thoughts that aren't the most helpful for us. It's easy to get stuck in them, but how can I try to foster a healthier narrative about myself? How can I build up my spouse, right? Too, like maybe I recognize that in my spouse, maybe my spouse is struggling with infertility or themselves. And so how can I help them feel affirmed? I love you. You are wonderful, beautiful, and your worth is not dependent on how many children we have. You haven't done anything wrong to deserve this. Or to affirm your marriage and say, our fruitfulness looks different, but what are ways in which our marriage is a beautiful thing? How can we call to mind some of those things that we're grateful for about our relationship? Perhaps we have a special connection because the suffering has brought us together and purified in a way. So I don't know. I think it's just a lot of opportunities to try to be mindful of the narrative, and then see how you can step in with more nods to the beautiful things about you, about spouse or your marriage.
Yeah.
Hey friends, it is your podcast host, Jillian. Just popping into this episode to ask you to consider supporting our podcast with a financial gift. This episode is brought to you by staff, volunteers who reviewed the content, and a professional editor. We would be so grateful for your financial support to keep this podcast sounding great and reaching more listeners who need a friend on the path of infertility. Thank you for your support.
I want to maybe dial in a little bit further into something that you said there. I think something I can recall last year, especially hearing from those in our community, is this feeling in those many areas that our marriage is second to others, or our family is not good enough, or it's not meeting the ideals, right? And that can be challenging too, even within the church, when so many of the church's beautiful documents are geared towards family life with children, what that looks like. And there's not a whole lot about what that looks like when the family is the size of two. So what might you say to a couple maybe struggling specifically with that, with our family not rising up, let's say, to the level that of this expectation, or what the world is maybe saying it should look like? And how might you encourage them to affirm just the two of them that are beautiful and exactly where God is calling them to be today?
Mm-hmm. Well, I can give some credit to an email that Springs just sent out recently, affirming that your family started when you vowed yourself to your spouse at your wedding, right? Mm-hmm. That is the creation of the family, not what the culture says, which is we're going to start a family once we start having kids.
Right.
It's a huge misconception, and I hate that misconception. Let's reaffirm that your marriage started on that day. You were a complete family in and of yourselves as a couple on that day, and have been a complete family ever since. Now, granted, it looks differently than what we hoped, right? It's okay to validate that there's pain, there's frustration, there's grief in that it looks different. But even if we never conceive and never grow our family in that way, the family unit is still complete. So I would just really hone in on that reality that 2 is complete, 3 is complete, 4 is, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I love that. And I think too that the explanation that you just gave could also, I think, really be a comfort to those who have one child or two children and still aren't able, their family looks differently than what they were hoping for. And it's so beautiful that we have the sacraments to lean on, and that moment that we became a family, that is the case. And I think for those who maybe that's a new concept for them, or for those who are trying to really accept that and live in that reality, I think it can be a big game changer. Because if you're waiting for your family to begin until you're able to have a child, or however many children you hoped to have, there's a whole lot of time that God is calling for a lot to occur and for the building up of your home and your family. And it's possible that you could miss that time or forget that he's there present with you today and calling you to fruitfulness today. And so I think just that idea that our family began at the moment that we exchanged our vows, the moment we got married, that today is how we can build up our family. And then I think that as we've had lots of conversations on the podcast, the couples could then, they know that, they live in that, and then they can, I think, be open, as you said, to what is God calling us to in this moment. But I would imagine it's hard to be open if you're not recognizing that God is asking that of you in this moment. And I didn't prep you with this question, but our mental health and our spiritual health and our physical health are all important to our whole human being, right? Our whole self. And I'm wondering if someone does believe that reality, but they're really more struggling with kind of the spiritual aspect, right? That they're struggling to take those things to God, or maybe it's together in prayer. And I know that you aren't a spiritual director, but what maybe if you had someone in front of you who that's where they're heading, it seems that they are starting this affirmation. It does feel like they're in a mental health perspective in a positive route, but where the block is spiritually. What would you suggest for that client?
Well, as often is the case in these situations, I try to refer them to the divine physician.
Beautiful.
In realizing that's a relationship. So if you're hitting snares in your relationship with God, okay, really dig into talking with him about those snares that you're hitting. Is it those narratives that you're talking about? Is it your angry, sad, discouraged, experiencing some feelings of despair, and there's that real temptation to give up on investing in your relationship with him? Whatever the spiritual struggle may be, I'd be like, have you talked with him recently? Digging into sharing what you have to say, but then also listening to hear what he has to say back to you.
Yeah.
Between the two of you, maybe some further dialogue.
Yeah. Sometimes I find anyways that I just need the obvious to be told to me, that it kind of laying it out simply. I tend to make things a little bit more complex in my mind, right? If you want to nurture, and that, right, too, with your spouse. Have you talked about this lately? And just that interaction, that communication can increase the intimacy that's there and the ability to support each other. And so I appreciate that. It's just such a simple question, but for me anyways, typically the most needed. So that's beautiful. Well, Edward, before we wrap up here, I just want to, I think, just ask you for any last words, both in your experience professionally, but personally. What have been, maybe you found the most helpful things for your clients or yourself that have helped you in the day to live abundantly, to notice the things that are maybe preventing you and your spouse from living that abundant life and accepting God in the present? What would you say?
Well, I would say that I think it's all about the both and, as you were talking about earlier, and balance. And so my answer is two-part. On the one hand, it's, I think we need to make space to really wrestle with how we're feeling and wrestle with the impacts, the implications of our infertility to ultimately make sense of the grief that we're experiencing. And so I think rather than stuffing it down, avoiding it, it's good to engage in it. So there's, on one hand, I think it's really important to do that. So that way, then it's not bottling up. It's not going to burst out at inopportune times and really like you're stuck with it and you're never like adjusting to it. So there's on the one hand, but then on the other side, we don't want to consume our life either. We don't want to define our life. And so on the other flip side is, like we were talking about earlier, don't forget about the present moment. Don't forget about how important it is to reconnect with those hobbies, reconnect with your spouse. What is it about your present day life that you don't want to regret not doing in the future, right? You really want to not lose any more time or lose any more meaningful aspects of your life to infertility when you've already lost so much. So I think that's a really good reminder to what are the things you can do, even if your life looks differently. How can you make the most and get the most meaning out of your life right now? I think that'll help out as well.
I Yeah, I love everything that you just said about the present time, because that's, for me, it's so hard to live in the present, right? I'm thinking about what I could have done in the past or what's going to happen tomorrow, and I'm worrying about that. And God is in the present. And I think that's probably a big key to unlocking living abundantly in your marriage today, because we don't know what tomorrow is going to bring, and we don't have a whole lot of control about what happened in the future, but we do have access to the present, to right now. And so in those cyclical occurrences in the season of infertility, to just be present today and asking God to help us be aware of his presence in the moment, I think is, absolutely a precious skill, maybe, that I think that's something you have to learn to do. But I appreciate everything you said, Edward. And I know that this episode will be, I think, just a support in our daily lives in a season of infertility, that we're all in this together. We're all here for each other in this community, but we know that it can be challenging in those moments when maybe there isn't a new podcast out, or there isn't a new blog out, or we don't have an event. And sometimes those day-to-day things are hard. And so I think that this will be a good comfort. So thank you so much, Edward, for joining today for this episode.
My pleasure. Thank you, Jillian.
Of course. Listeners, if you would like to get in touch with Edward and you live near him, we'll link all of his contact information in the show notes so you can find his practice and some of his other episodes as well, which are always so helpful. And just know, listeners, that we're here for you, we're walking with you, and it's an honor to be here for you. We'll see you next time.
Thank you so much for joining us for this Springs in the Desert podcast episode. We would be so grateful if you took a minute to rate and review us so that we can reach more listeners. Don't forget to check out our social media pages on Facebook and Instagram, and go to our website, springsinthedesert.org, where you can sign up for our newsletter and community prayer list, read our blog, and register for virtual and in-person events. Most importantly, remember that God loves you so much, and so do we.